It's Tuesday, April 11th, episode 208 of the 359 podcast. I'm BBG, and I'm here with Alfred Ng and Roger Cheng. Good morning, guys. What are we talking about today?
Morning. We're going to be talking about Apple and the...
Go figure.
I know. It's not something Apple wants us to talk about.
But it's not all positive news.
It's not positive.
Exactly,
No, it's Qualcomm leveling some serious charges. Specifically, one of the biggest ones is the sort of quasi-confirming a rumor that Apple had actually dumbed down the Qualcomm chip in certain iPhone 7s that came out last year. If you had a T-Mobile or a AT&T iPhone, congratulations, you had a slightly artificially slowed down modem, thanks to all kinds of shenanigans with Intel. We'll get more into that in the podcast.
Yikes on bikes.
Well, this is only the iPhone 7, though, right? So
it's only the iPhone 7.
My inferior iPhone, that's not the 7, that has a headphone jack, is perfectly fine.
Well,
maybe.
The problem is that the new iPhone 7s were theoretically supposed to tap into faster network speeds that your phone couldn't, except Apple kind of dumbed that part down. So I will explain why in the podcast. We'll also be talking about a cool feature that Alfred wrote about how tax season is really open season for hackers.
Yes, file your taxes now if you haven't already, which you should all.
You should. I mean, because
the deadline's in a week.
Yeah,
but
you should really get that going.
There's another reason for that we'll
talk
involving
about that.
Hackers. So.
And lastly, of course, we'll have to talk about United Airlines incident because that's what everyone's talking about right now.
Yep.
And how it's just gone viral. It's exploded. So I'm really hesitant to use the word explode with the plane. I know that's terrible.
Yeah,
I should do that.
Not intentional.
Not intentional at all. All right, so let's get started. As always, if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. Brian will pick out the best, and we will get to them in 3 minutes and 59 seconds.
From 3, 2...
Welcome to the 359, where we talk about the top tech news of the day and all the other crap we want to throw in. I'm Roger Cheng.
I'm Alfred Ng.
The gloves are off in a spat between Apple and Qualcomm, with Qualcomm filing a response to Apple's patent licensing lawsuit. One of the biggest charges is a rumor that's floated around for a while, the idea that Apple dumbed down the Qualcomm modem chip in certain iPhone 7s so they would perform the same as the supposedly inferior Intel modems. As a reminder, Apple started selling iPhone 7s with both Intel and Qualcomm modems in different versions. For instance, if you had a T-Mobile or AT&T iPhone, you had an Intel chip, while Verizon and Sprint iPhones got the Qualcomm one. So, what do you think? I mean, this rumor's been floating around, but what do you think of the idea that Apple intentionally dumbed down one version to keep it on pace with the inferior chip?
I mean, I can't confirm it or anything like that, but it seems very plausible, considering that there had been plenty of rumors as far as Mac product goes, where there's kind of this like planned obsolescence kind of idea where, instead of just having it work forever after a certain point, it just kind of slows down. And I've noticed that on a lot of my devices,
right?
Where, okay, I'll just buy an entirely new one. I just don't understand why it would only be for T-Mobile and Sprint iPhones, but not the other two.
I think it's less about planned obsolescence and more about sort of keeping things competitive. Again, for the first time, Apple opened it up so Intel provided a modem chip into some of the iPhone 7s. And at least as far as what the Qualcomm charges state, that Intel modem was not as good. And so to keep everyone on a level playing field, they actually intentionally dumbed down the Qualcomm chip. And I think it's because Apple wants to have two suppliers, right? They don't want to just get Qualcomm chips. They want to have Intel and Qualcomm together, keeps them both on their toes, and theoretically gets them a better price.
All right, well, I wrote a story, and if you haven't filed your taxes yet, you definitely should. So during tax refund season, you'll find that, or a study found that spam email related to taxes increased by about 6,000%.
Wow.
Or so. And they're all basically saying, hey, we have your tax information here. Like, do you want it? And they can come in a Word document that contains a virus on it. And then once they fish out your password and all the information, first thing they'll look for is your tax information, like your W-2, your driver's license, all that stuff in your emails, hopefully.
And just to break it down, like what is the term phishing comes up a lot with security.
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean?
It basically means when you they send you a link and it looks like a link that you would normally log into, but in fact they're just key logging your password.
Gotcha.
So then they basically get your password by pretending to be one website. It's like just stealing it that way and then using that to log in on your account.
Gotcha. So yeah, file your taxes now, and be mindful of random emails up here. All right. We couldn't do this podcast without talking about the United Airlines mess. It was when a passenger was violently ejected from the plane after refusing to give up his seat. Videos of the incident went viral on Facebook and Twitter. Is this like the end of United? I mean, what do you think?
I mean, I think airliners tend to have a lot of money, but I don't think they can really shake this off literally after last week with the leggings issue.
Yeah.
Which, at least with that one, they had an excuse,
Right.
although it's a terrible excuse, but at least they had an excuse. With this one, they've tried,
It's sad that they can look back to the leggings incident and go, well, those were the good days.
but they've tried mucking it up with basically their answers were like, oh well, he was being rude and he was being
Right. They
belligerent.
basically pinned it on the passenger.
But there's video of what happens, and it's just this whole thing has inspired just a serious backlash against United. There's an entire subreddit now devoted just to United horror stories.
Wow, that's crazy. All right, lastly, I wanted to plug our Tech Enable package, which explores the role that tech plays in providing new kinds of accessibility. The last chapter, which is a how-to guide on talking to your parents into adopting smart home tech, published today, but the whole series is worth a look. So for that story and more, check us out on CNET. I'm Roger Cheng.
I'm Alfred Ng.
Thanks for listening.
So going back to the Qualcomm chips,
Yeah.
let's talk about the timing of when this started to come to light, because some people are alleging that this has been well known since the debut of the phone.
Yeah. So there was a lot of discussion about sort of the speed differences between the Qualcomm chips and the Intel chips. Just in general, the sort of speed tests have shown that the ones running on the Intel chips performed worse than the Qualcomm ones. But in this particular instance, Qualcomm's actually accusing Apple of basically limiting the capabilities of that Qualcomm chip. So it actually could theoretically go even faster, can tap into faster network speeds. And Qualcomm is saying that Apple kind of dumbed it down to kind of keep it a little bit more on pace with the performance you get with an Intel chip.
Sure. And do we think that there's any influence from carriers over this?
No. You know what? I've talked to the carriers about this. I mean, most of them wouldn't even touch this topic. A lot of the times, they basically just get the phone that Apple gives to them, and they don't really question it that much. They do their own testing for sure. But the thing of it is that the testing isn't going to find that the chip isn't going to perform well, because it does perform well. It connects to the network. You get a decent coverage with it. But in terms of like full network speed, you're not going to get the full access to the network carrier speed technology.
Right. And just to quell some fears, this is only isolated to the iPhone 7, not the iPhone 6, 6S.
Right, because the iPhone 6, but basically all the generations before the iPhone 7 used only Qualcomm modems. And for the first time, they opened it up to Intel and Qualcomm because they wanted to get a second supplier. Frankly, they just wanted the competition there for suppliers. And I think that's sort of the result. And Intel, they're not really known for making modems for phones. They're really they're very few customers. They're like a handful of, I think, Chinese phone makers, and Apple was their biggest customer. So it's again, it kind of goes back. It's kind of a black mark for
So
them.
would it be just to keep like their phones equal with the phones with the Intel chips to make sure that Intel kind of stays in the game? I'm like having a hard time understanding why Apple would purposely cripple their own devices
Because
to put them
I
on
think
equal
they want
playing ground.
put them on equal playground. They wanted to avoid a situation where like half the iPhone 7s out there performed significantly better than the other half.
Mm-hmm.
And like you'd be able to figure that out via speed tests, and they did. Some of the speed tests did find that even after the alleged crippling, those Qualcomm chip phones seemed to perform better than or more consistently than the Intel.
I mean, if they
ones.
wanted to do the whole, we want to keep diversity in our chips so that in case something kind of goes wrong, like this batch is still fine. Why wouldn't they just put all the Qualcomm chips that perform better on like the Plus, and then the Intel chips on the 7 on its own?
I think it's a matter of carrier technology.
Uh-huh.
If you look at the way the carriers were segmented, Sprint and Verizon run on kind of similar technology than AT&T Mobile. They kind of run on similar technology,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why the chips kind of went that direction.
Mhm.
They couldn't. It would be more expensive to segment on different versions of the phone as opposed to like different carriers, because you have to design a specific chip for Sprint Verizon anyway. So you might as well just have one manufacturer do that.
Shelton in the chat is asking, why should Qualcomm care? Wouldn't this hurt Apple, not Qualcomm?
Well, I mean, Qualcomm cares because they argue that I mean, it's part of the lawsuit. It's part of the charges that they're throwing at them, and one of them is that their argument is that Apple hurt customers by doing this, by basically um, keeping customers from having the best possible experience on their iPhone 7 by artificially dumbing this chip down,
Throttling
throttling. Yeah,
in hopes that you'd buy it again.
Well,
I don't know if it's that. I mean, I really think it's more about trying to keep things on level pace with Intel because they wanted to keep Intel in the game because they wanted that second supplier in there.
well, isn't this also in response to a lawsuit from Apple against Qualcomm?
Yes, absolutely. This is a counter lawsuit. It is actually a formal legal response to the patent licensing lawsuit that Apple filed back in January. And Apple, for the record, I mean, didn't really comment specifically on the Qualcomm charges from yesterday. Basically, just referred back to the filing from January. And basically, they argue that Qualcomm has been benefiting from unfair royalties for years.
Mm-hmm. The chat wants us to move on to United. They
All
say that
right.
This
Oh,
should
boy.
be the main discussion here. So
Sure.
farming it back out to you guys, we want to know what your personal response and experiences are. Maybe you've got a horror story from United yourself. What is your takeaway from this? I mean, we make a lot of jokes on this, but this is dark. This is awful.
No,
Kinda
Yeah, I
stuff
mean, if you
unfolding
watch
here.
the video, it's pretty graphic.
Yeah.
and it's a little disturbing. I mean, just
But,
from an almost tech perspective, like it just sort of shows you how unsavvy United is in terms of like the social element of things. Because the initial statement they put out was this kind of like robotic statement,
Yes.
and they really blamed the passenger. And then the follow-up statement from the CEO wasn't that much better. Like,
no, he's
we
still blaming the
apologize
passenger.
for the overbookings, like for reaccommodating the overbooked
Mhm.
passengers. I'm like, you're not even addressing the issue here.
Yes.
Like, it's just, and it was, yeah. I have to wonder if that guy's job is on the line.
I mean, you also have to kind of consider how often this has happened. If we're talking like tech angle on this, like consider how often this probably happened, like before smartphones were
Yeah.
a thing.
No,
where
that's the
anybody
thing.
could
Like
record
the
this.
idea of like adding the video element, whether it's live video or recorded video, and having it post
Mhm.
like live, definitely adds an element. Like just the idea of this public shaming that you could do.
Just
almost
consider all the things
instantaneously.
that like United might have gotten away with, without the effect of social media putting a magnifying
Well, I didn't
lens on
even
this.
know they did. So I don't know if you guys knew the situation, right? Like the full breakdown of the situation.
Hmm.
Like this guy was randomly selected to be
removed.
removed
Yeah.
from the plane because they needed to make room for United crew that needed to get to Louisville. I didn't even know they did. Like I know they offered incentives to get
Yes.
people to get off the plane, but I didn't know they like had a computer like randomly select who
Yeah.
I think
gets
it's
booted off.
I think it's their fail-safe, and it could still be a complete load of BS. They
Right.
could just throw a dart at a board.
I'm
of the
willing to
seating
bet, by
Yeah,
the
arrangement.
way-
a lot of people actually asked about their computer, how it randomly selects people.
Yeah,
and
I'm willing to
they
bet
have
like
not
if you're
responded to that.
if you're a United like status member,
Mhm.
there's no way you are randomly selected for this.
Yeah.
This is all also. So we're on the tech angle of the power of the mobile phone
Yeah.
and the social network and how this quickly came to light, and there's not a whole lot of gray. I mean, there's always gray area, but there's a whole lot less in this scenario because
Yep.
we got a front row seat.
Yep.
This is also all coming to fruition on the tail of the new FCC commissioner making moves to try to ban any and all phone activity
Right.
on
Well,
an airplane.
I thought it was just talking on the phone.
Was it just
They're
talking?
just talking
It's
on
just
the
okay,
phone,
thank you for
yeah.
clarifying
And
that.
Yeah.
also, that never went into effect really. Like they had bandied it about, and I think the guy just effectively said,
I'm
"Nope,
su-
we're not going to do this."
I'm surprised
Okay.
that was even being considered because, like, do you get reception when you're on a plane?
Not
really.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, so I was like,
But I mean,
didn't
it's
even
like
know
a
it was
Well,
possible.
convenient
no,
related
actually-
territory.
Because if you go in-flight Wi-Fi
Oh,
with Wi-Fi calling, you can actually talk on the
Oh.
phone,
okay.
or you could FaceTime.
Nah.
I mean, you could be
Yeah.
a jerk about it.
I just thought that was interesting that they were unfolding kind of side by side.
But no,
Right.
yeah, when you're saying there's no gray area because everyone can see it because it's all online and somebody just happened, and there's multiple camera angles of it too.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And the thing is that, typically the responses from major corporations has been to create a gray area where it's like, oh, well, he was being belligerent. Let's blame it on him.
Right.
It's his fault. You look at the Chicago Police Department's response where it's like he fell. And then you look at basically, everyone's calling them out on their answers where it's like, yo, there's video. We all saw what happened. So you
Right.
can't tell us that like this is like
You can't spin it.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever had any nasty experiences with United? We got Josh in the chat says I got stuck in SG for 2 days because of mechanical problem on the UA
It's
787.
SG Singapore, right?
I'm assuming
Yeah.
so, right? That's the code.
That's
I
what
don't.
anytime I hear SG I know
Yeah.
it's
I'm pretty
usually
sure.
Singapore.
Um,
That's a
I
rough
don't,
place to be
what? I don't
stuck.
fly United. I tend to fly Delta. I try to stay away from United. And I probably will so even more after this. But yeah, I mean, I haven't had any experiences with United that's this out anywhere near this level.
Yeah, usually the only issue for me with flights is like it's delayed or
Yeah,
never an
yeah.
overbooking kind of issue, which is the other thing.
I did have one situation where I was booked in the same seat as another person, and we were double booked, but they found a seat for me really quickly.
Yeah.
So that wasn't like a real issue. I was panicking for a second. I'm like, wait, what? I'm looking at his ticket and my ticket. We're like, they're the exact same. How's this happening?
That's really irresponsible of the
but no,
airline.
it happens a lot though. They
I know.
they overbook planes.
They
all
really
the time,
shouldn't do that.
right?
Yeah, I absolutely.
It's like the only industry that does that.
It's such a terrible practice.
Yeah.
I've had a rather positive experience with, I think it was a long time ago, but I believe it was American Airlines, almost 20 years ago. I was flying to Florida and back alone. I was younger. And then what ended up happening was like a mechanical problem caused the plane to like last flight out of the night get canceled, and they chauffeured me out, got me a suite in a really swanky hotel, gave me, comp my ticket, got me back in the plane first thing in the morning, gave me free round trips for a year. Like, it was nuts.
Well, that was 20 years ago.
Well,
They
yeah,
did
that's kind of what United was trying to do. They were offering first $400 voucher and a stay at a
Right.
hotel, and then they bumped up to 800, and still nobody wanted to move.
You know what though? Like, why not bump it up a little bit more?
Or why not bump them up to like business class, unless that's
Yeah.
overbooked too? The idea that like if people can't be moved by money,
I'm
it's-
guessing the plane itself is overbooked.
Yeah,
though.
but-
Why
or
not
set
bump
them
it
up
to
with another airliner?
or
Because
1,000 or 1,200? Like, if you kept going up in increments, like eventually
Yeah.
someone's gonna raise their
yeah,
hand.
and
right?
then like if you only needed 4 people to get off, you're not really cutting yourself at a loss that much.
Right.
That's why like it's one of the things. It's such a stupid response on their part to call the police
yeah,
over a man who was on the phone with his lawyer. And at the same time, just essentially, he paid for his ticket.
Right.
It's not like he snuck on. It's not like he was drunk or belligerent on
Well,
the
just
plane.
really what this comes down to is how is this so poorly managed in advance where they didn't pre-accommodate for the necessary crew? Like, these schedules
yeah,
do change and things ebb and flow, but come on, there should be some kind of reserve seating program to the extent where the customers are not impacted by poor management of the crew. And people ask, why couldn't the crew just get on the next flight? Well, then that would have only caused a domino effect on the further flight
Right.
status.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
those
yeah,
guys
yeah.
need to be in Louisville to get that next flight out, kind of
Yep.
thing. It's a tough one.
yeah. It is. It reminds me. I don't know if you guys watched 30 Rock, but the Matt Damon episode when he's the pilot of the plane.
Yep.
And he's declaring sky law. This is
remember
what it
that.
is. Sky law.
You gotta wonder if there could be a better system. If anybody out there has an idea, we'd love to hear
The
it.
better system is to not overbook.
No
there
kidding.
you go.
Seriously, like no other industry does this. Imagine you go in a movie theater.
Right.
And
And,
it's
then,
like,
like,
oh, we
halfway through
yeah.
the movie, you're like, sorry, no, we have the seat reserved for somebody else.
Yeah, it's absurd. They just don't do that. It's such a terrible practice, and it's like to maximize your profits, but at the same time, like it's at the expense of the customer.
Yep.
On the flip side of things, JW in the chat says, to be honest, I've always flown with United and have only had good experiences.
Oh.
I'm 6'8", very tall, and they're always complimentary towards me to the exit row if available.
Oh well. I mean, if you're a
Silver
regular, the
lining.
thing of it is, if you're a regular flyer, if you're a status flyer,
hmm
they treat you a lot better. You're definitely treated differently. There's definitely like sort of a long gap between sort of regular common flyers and folks who like are regular travelers, frequent flyers who you have status or gold, diamond, whatever the levels are. But they definitely treat you better.
Imagine Sagi says, the problem is not with the customer, it's on the airlines. Agree with Alfred.
Well, there you go, Alfred.
Finally
Did
get a
it.
vote of confidence
You
on this show
finally did
besides
it.
something besides your
No,
hair.
no, actually, thank you though. That sounded pretty sarcastic for me, but
I try.
There's the delivery.
it's
Can't
hard,
blame the comment.
It's hard for me to say anything positive without it sounding sarcastic.
That's
Is
fine.
it?
What about a cooperate? Here we go. I think I might be reading between the lines here, but Sheldon says, how about several airlines with standby pilots to shuttle ERA to other locations? So I'm thinking like maybe that means why couldn't the United staff jump on the Delta flight in the next 10 minutes?
Yeah, and I thought they did that too. I thought there was some sort of like, handshake deal where other airlines could help, like, provide what were they called, jump seats or whatever for crews of other companies to
Right.
get them going. I mean that makes sense, right?
It's just a simple cooperation. It's,
Yeah.
you know, a synergy between the airline
I feel
services.
like that happens, but maybe not to the extent that it should be.
I mean, it's definitely a thing. I've seen
Right.
it in the movies.
Yeah, it's gotta be
it's
true.
gotta be
So
true.
it's
Yeah,
real.
That sounded dumber after
I
said
know,
it.
I know, but you know what? That's where I got my facts too. So it's cool.
Why couldn't they just randomly choose again? Why were they so locked into coming after this guy who obviously was severely resistant?
Well,
to,
I mean, they
I-
did randomly choose. He was one
why
of the
couldn't they
randomly.
randomly choose
They
again?
they chose 4 people. 3 people actually already left.
I
They
thought
kinda
two. I thought like a couple left.
a couple,
like
well, no,
a man and a woman or something.
but it was
like
3 other people who
Oh.
like begrudgingly got up
Okay.
and left.
And
I
were
think he was, like,
compensated.
yeah, and the last guy was this one, and he.
Well,
did
I
not
think
wanna
I
leave.
think it's one of those things where maybe like it's like a Hunger Games kind of thing where oh well we rolled the dice, you 4 were picked, we can't do it again, kind of thing.
Right,
you
right,
know?
right. Like, yeah, like if he obviously if he like he makes that much noise, they can't like.
I'm
That's
just
a weird precedent
yeah.
to set to like redo the process just because of
Yeah.
one guy was super belligerent.
like
'cause,
imagine if like you're on that flight and they decided to do it again and then like somehow you get picked and well like the idea is like okay well that guy raised such a fuss about
right.
it that he
I'm
could
gonna do the
say,
same thing.
I'm just gonna do the same
Yeah.
thing.
Nubs in the chat clarifies, and thank you for this. This is the term I was trying to think of. They do have that. My brother is a pilot, and they can deadhead with a lot of
Deadhead,
companies.
yes.
Thank you. Yep,
Yeah,
now
yeah,
I remember
yeah.
that.
I've heard that term.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation. I personally have concerns about United as a company in the near future.
Yeah.
Because this is far from the first and certainly far from the last as things start unfolding. As you said, there's an entire subreddit dedicated to it now. I only got to kind of skim through this, but I did see a horror story about a luggage handler throwing a dog cage.
Ooh.
Like, I don't know
Ooh.
I kind of feel like that's a little bit worse just because it's a dog.
That's pretty
Call me
bad.
crazy.
That's pretty bad.
Let's see if they're still an airline at the end of the year.
I don't know. Maybe they get bought out.
That would be nice to see. All right, that's probably more than enough time we've spent. But there's been a great discussion, everybody. Thank you for
Yeah,
joining us.
thank you.
Let's wrap it up for the day.
Yeah, if you liked anything you saw or heard here, check us out on CNET. Our podcast is also available on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, SoundCloud, FeedBurner, and Google Play Music. We will see you all tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.